Bless you. Hi, welcome back to the Nowhere Emporium. I have worked out that if I read 2 chapters a day, I think I can get the book finished. Maybe. I'll see what I can do. This is going to be a bit of a longer one though today. Obviously, feel free to pause it halfway through if you want to. This is chapter 19, Missing. Mr. Silver vanished the day after Ellie's birthday ball. It was a Sunday, and the sky was heavy with black clouds and thunder. Papa has never missed opening time before. Ellie stood at the window, tapping her foot on the floor. Something's wrong. Daniel had to agree. In the few months he had been a part of Mr. Silver's world, he had never once seen his boss open the shop so much as a second late. I wonder if he... Daniel's voice trailed away. Something lay on the floor underneath Mr. Silver's desk. He picked it up and fanned through its many pages. The Book of Wonders. Ellie, have you ever known your papa to leave this lying around? Ellie edged towards him. She reached out trembling fingers and touched the book. It looks like it's been burned or something. She was right. The ends of some of the pages were blackened, and Daniel found a cluster of shriveled pages where wonders had been scorched away. As he examined the book, a loose scrap of paper fell out. Ellie grabbed it. It's part of a note from Papa. What? Said Daniel. What does it say? Let me see. He craned over her shoulder and read. Dearest Ellie and Daniel Holmes, I am sorry that I could not be there to give you this message in person, but time is against us. What you are about to read is frightening, but please don't panic. For reasons I do not have time to explain, the Emporium is in danger. Worse than that, it is becoming dangerous. I have a plan. If you follow it to the letter, you should be fine. You'll be safe in the shop front. Stay there whenever possible. And when the time comes, you must... The message ended abruptly. That's it, said Daniel. That can't be it. He picked up the paper, stared at the ragged edge where the rest of the message had obviously been burned away. Brilliant. Whatever burned the book destroyed the note as well, and your dad's plan. Ellie was staring at the message, shaking her head. What's happened? What does that mean? That stuff about the Emporium being dangerous. Where is he, Daniel? Daniel pointed to the coat stand. Look, his coat is still hanging up. I don't think he's gone outside. Maybe we should just wait here like he says. I've ignored his orders before and it didn't end well. Ellie shook her head. He only wants us to stay here so we could follow his plan, and we don't know what that is, do we? We have to find him and tell him we're in the dark. He's probably relying on us, Daniel. Mr. Silver's apartments were the logical place to begin the search. They found the door open a fraction, and a labyrinth of grand chambers lay in wait, each made entirely from books. As he searched, Daniel was distracted time and again by the strange and wonderful surroundings in which Mr. Silver chose to live. He found Ellie in a garden of books under a huge tree blossoming with intricately folded pages. He's not here, she said, and she kicked the trunk of the tree, shaking pages to the paper floor. Maybe we should go back to the shop, said Daniel. But his note made it sound like he won't be back any time soon, didn't it? Ellie said. He's so infuriating sometimes with his secrets. Why didn't he just tell us what's going on? So, we just keep looking without a plan, said Daniel. How many rooms in the Emporium? 1,000? Are we supposed to check them all? A thought flared to life in his mind. Search parties. The lobby of the Nowhere Hotel was packed with impatient performers and vendors eager to start work. This was the way of things. Every day the staff would gather dressed to the nines in black and gold, checking pocket watches and timepieces until the glorious moment when twilight cloaked the world outside and the doors of the Emporium opened. Excuse me, sorry. Daniel pushed and squirmed through the pack looking for Caleb and Anya. Ouch! Watch it! Hey, there they are. Ellie, I found them. The fire breather and snake charmer were standing together, as they always seemed to be. Caleb stood a full head taller than anyone apart from Anya and was holding court amid a group of vendors. So, out there in the real world, not only is the moon 400 times smaller than the sun, it is 400 times closer, so they appear the same size in the sky, and when they meet, the moon covers the sun completely, day turns to night, and not a bit of magic is used. Now that is a wonder. Anya, who looked like she might fall asleep at any minute, caught sight of Daniel. Daniel, Ellie. Caleb broke off from his story. What brings you two around here? And what's all this about? he asked, pointing to the crowd. We're late opening up. Never been late before. Papa's missing, said Ellie. We found his book of wonders in the shop, all burned and bashed, and this note. She handed the note to Caleb, whose face became grave. Missing? He asked. At opening time? He exchanged glances with Anya. That isn't right. No. Won't do at all. Will you ask the rest of the staff to search with us? Asked Daniel. It'd give us a better chance of finding him. Caleb scratched the stubble on his square chin. I don't know, he said gravely. What if he turns up? What if he suddenly opens the doors and none of us are anywhere to be seen because we're off searching the Emporium? Read the note, said Daniel. Doesn't sound like he'll be opening the Emporium, does it? He says it's dangerous. We need to find him, Caleb. We've got to know what's going on and what his plan is. If the Emporium's in danger, it means we're all in danger too, added Ellie. I don't think Papa would abandon us. I think he's in here somewhere. We're worried about him, Caleb. Anya said, It does seem to be an emergency, Caleb. What if he's ill, or has fallen and banged his head? Or what if one of his wonders is misbehaving? She turned to Daniel. It happens very rarely. Doors are left open, things escape. Last time it was flying pencils, very sharp. Caleb gave a thoughtful nod. That was an interesting day. He shook his big head. But I'm sorry, we can't help. Rules are rules. We were created for one purpose. We must be ready always to take our posts. Ellie looked crestfallen, but Daniel was getting an idea. I could make it worth your while, he said. I could smuggle you something in from the outside world. Come on, there must be something you want. Caleb poured down at him. Are you offering me a bribe, Daniel Holmes? A bribe? Said Daniel, with his eyes wide. Not me. Just a gift. A way of saying thanks. Caleb mulled this over. He scratched his big chin. Very well. I want a kitten. A fluffy one. He shook Daniel's hand, then turned to the rest of the lobby. Attention! We have a job to do. Word spread quickly through the lobby. Mr. Silver was missing. Everyone was chattering and gossiping, agreeing that the loss of their leader was the worst disaster that could possibly happen. What do we do without him? We're lost! This place went last week. And so the search was on. There were many members of staff, many pairs of eyes and ears. They scoured the Emporium's catacomb of passageways and doorways. They searched through vaults and tunnels in a basement that seemed to be mined into the earth. They climbed to the very highest staircases where the air was thin and cold and filled with crystal flakes of ice. They even rediscovered a long-lost section of the Emporium, buried under a rainforest that had spilled from an open door. But there was no trace of Mr. Silver. To add to the worry, many search parties returned with news of strange cracks appearing on the Emporium walls, white lines crawling over black bricks like jagged spider trails. In some places it was worse than others. There was even a rumour that one of the corridors had collapsed. It's as if he had vanished, said Caleb, after yet another search party had reported no success. He clicked his fingers. Gone! Poof! Just like that. Are you sure he hasn't left the shop? He wouldn't leave the Emporium without the book, said Ellie. It's practically part of him. Then I'm sorry to say I'm stumped. Daniel's mind was ticking. It just didn't add up. Why would Silver vanish? If the Emporium was in trouble, as his note suggested, and the cracks in the walls confirmed, then Mr. Silver would be the last to leave. Daniel knew that, and why'd he dump the book? Wait a minute, he said. When we got to New York, Mr. Silver finally found his treasure, whatever he'd been searching for, and now, a few days later, he's gone. That can't be a coincidence, can it? But what was the treasure? Said Ellie. Was it something dangerous? And why would he disappear with it? Daniel shook his head. There's only one way to find out. I guess I'm heading back to Bazaar's Bazaar. Chapter 20. Blood and Snow. Are you sure about this? Ellie's nose was pressed against the glass of the Emporium's front window. She peered out into the wintry Manhattan darkness. Snow had begun to fall. It was now well after midnight, and Mr. Silver had been gone an entire day. "I'm sure," said Daniel, pulling on his coat and gloves and scarf. "I wish I could go with you." To Daniel's great surprise, Ellie grabbed him and hugged him tight. "Be careful." "I will. I'll better go." The New York streets were eerily silent that night, every sound smothered by the thick layer of snow coating the city. Mostly people had chosen not to brave the bitter cold and ice-coated sidewalks. Central Park seemed even bigger now that Daniel was alone, and the darkness brought with it the sort of characters who wished to go about their business unnoticed. He tucked his chin to his chest and hurried on, trying not to look at anyone. When he walked under a small footbridge, he imagined that someone was following and began to run. He did not stop until he was past the plaza, 8 blocks later. He spun into the alley and arrived at Bazaar's Bazaar. There was only one other customer inside, a man in a long brown coat browsing row upon row of bottles. Daniel approached the counter. "Excuse me?" The shopkeeper, the one with skin like blue-veined cheese, had been examining a golden locket with a magnifying glass. At the sound of Daniel's voice, he looked up, one milky eye magnified through the lens. "No refunds," he said, and he turned his attention back to the locket on the counter. "What?" "I never forget a face," said the shopkeeper, "especially a face connected with so much cash. You were in here a few nights back with a rich man. Well, you can tell him from me, sending a kid isn't going to soften me. Oh no, I don't do refunds." Daniel shook his head. "That's not why I'm here. I wanted to ask you what you sold us the other night." The shopkeeper looked up and smiled, showing Daniel a crooked row of rotten yellow teeth. "Ah, a very fine item." "What was it?" The shopkeeper leaned over the counter on folded arms. "Very fine. Let's just say it's not every day you come into possession of a vial of unicorn blood." A crash from nearby. The second customer had dropped a metal box to the floor and was on his hands and knees scooping up the powder that had spilled. "Hey!" yelled the shopkeeper. "Careful with the merchandise! You break it, you buy it." "Unicorn blood?" said Daniel. "Are you pulling my leg?" "I'm not pulling anything." "So you're telling me that there really are unicorns out there?" Daniel had come to accept that the world was a far stranger place than he had ever imagined. Even so, a unicorn seemed a little far-fetched. "Kid, if you know where to look, everything's out there." "Why would someone want unicorn blood?" The shopkeeper smiled. "Unicorn blood," he said, "is sometimes called liquid life. Just a few drops will cure you of your ills and boost your strength. Very rare, very expensive, which is the quality I like best." And there it was. What Daniel had hoped was not true. Silver was ill. There was no other explanation, and the treasure was a cure. When he left the bazaar, the cold of the night had sharpened and the snow was falling harder. He pulled his coat and scarf tight, leaned into the wind as he walked. In Central Park, trees sagged under the weight of the snow. Daniel's feet crunched through the sparkling white canvas, leaving footprints. When he reached the darkest part of the path where it wound under the little footbridge, he was struck again by the strong sense that someone was following. He cast a quick glance back the way he had come. He was not alone. Through the falling snow he saw a figure in a long brown coat and recognized it as the customer he'd seen in the bazaar. The figure slowed as Daniel turned, as though trying not to look suspicious. And then something happened. Something that turned Daniel's spine to ice. 2 glowing dots appeared on the figure's face, burning orange like cigarette ends. They were eyes. Daniel could see the entrance to the park, 200 meters away. He began to run. Cold air burned his lungs as his feet pounded the snow. The gate grew nearer with every step, but the man was catching up. Daniel's blood froze as a hand grabbed at his coat. He squirmed and yelped, managing to slip out of his coat, landing a wild blow to the man's ear. He broke free and tore through the gate to the streets. The Emporium was only a block away. Daniel skidded between 2 parked cars, leapt onto the sidewalk. He ran and ran and ran, not looking back, imagining cold hands wrapping around his neck. Warm light poured from the shop window just a street away, and he thought he saw someone standing in the door, someone very tall. Daniel's feet hit a frozen puddle. He landed hard on the ice, his knee taking the brunt of the impact. He looked up into a skeletal face, skin hanging loose, eyes glowing amber. The man chasing him was suddenly in front of him. "Where's the unicorn blood?" said the old man. The voice was a rasping whisper. "What? I don't have it, I swear." A hand crashed across Daniel's face. He tasted his own blood. "I'm not messing around, kid. Tell me where the unicorn blood is." The man stopped mid-thought, gazed up at something. For half a heartbeat he was still, like a startled deer. Then his burning eyes grew wide, and he turned and began to run. Something else brushed past Daniel, a blur of grey that was gone in an instant. He gathered himself. He could feel hot blood seeping from his knee. The short walk across the street to the Emporium seemed to take forever. "So, who saved you?" said Ellie, back in the warmth of the shop. She was dabbing Daniel's knee with whiskey from Silver's desk. It burned and stung. "I don't know," he said through gritted teeth. "For a second I thought it was Mr. Silver." "I'd have seen him if it was," she said. She placed the whiskey back on the desk. "There, done. So, you really think Papa is ill?" "It makes sense," said Daniel, rolling his trouser leg back down. "The way he's been acting, how old he looks all of a sudden. He can't have bought the unicorn blood for anything else, can he? The shopkeeper said the stuff's famous for curing diseases." Ellie took a long breath. "Why hasn't he told me?" "He probably doesn't want you to worry." "Daniel, what if the cure didn't work? What if we can't find Papa because he's gone somewhere far off in the shop to die? The plan he tried to leave us, it might have been instructions for what to do after he's gone." The bell at the door sang out and a deep voice said, "Hello? Anybody here?" "We didn't lock the door," said Ellie. She wandered around towards the front door where a tall, broad-shouldered man stood, silver hair and a moustache glinting in the firelight. He wore an expensive-looking charcoal suit and carried a silver-handled cane. Electric blue eyes darted around the room, but he did not see Ellie. She was as much a ghost to him as to any other outsider who came into the Emporium. The tall man spotted Daniel at the back of the shop and moved towards him, passing straight through Ellie like she was made of nothing but light and shadow. He stopped in front of Daniel, staring down at him. "Are you looking for something in particular?" Daniel asked. "Not something," said the man. "Someone. I'm here to see Lucien Silver." Ellie held up her hands, indicating she didn't know the stranger. "Nobody's ever come looking for Papa before." "He's, Mr. Silver isn't available?" The tall man reached into his coat and produced a grey leather wallet. From the wallet he took a piece of paper and unfolded it. He handed the paper to Daniel. It was a clipping from a newspaper, some sort of review about a magic show. The date on the paper was 1884. There was a picture of two men. One of them was the man who stood before Daniel now, and he had not aged at all since the photograph was taken. The other man staring out from the picture was a teenage Mr. Silver. There was no doubting it. Beneath the photograph the caption read, "The incredible magic act of Vindicta Sharp, Wright, and Lucien Silver is the talk of the theatrical scene." Ellie scanned the clipping over Daniel's shoulder. "He knows Papa," she said. "As you've probably gathered from the photograph, my name is Vindicta Sharp," said the tall man. "I was, and remain, a friend of Lucien's." He took back the photograph and indicated the young Mr. Silver. "In fact, I was his teacher." "Somebody taught Mr. Silver?" said Daniel. Sharp nodded. "I will come straight to the point. I am worried about Lucien. I attended his charming Halloween ball, and I was shocked to see how weak he has become. And now tonight, when I return to check on him, I find a child running the shop. The very same child I have just rescued from a mugger on the sidewalk." "That was you?" said Daniel. Sharp waved the question away. "If you wish to repay me, tell me what is going on around here. Where is Lucien Silver?" Daniel glanced at Ellie. "I don't like him," she said. She sniffed the air around Sharp. He smells funny. And if he's such great chums with Papa, how come I've never heard of him? Ellie had been brought up by Mr. Silver to protect the Emporium, to trust no one from the outside world. Daniel knew this, but these were desperate times. Silver was missing, and the Emporium was beginning to decay. Vindictus Sharp had saved Daniel's life, and he seemed genuinely worried about Mr. Silver. Surely Daniel owed him a chance. We don't know where Mr. Silver is, he said. He's missing, but we think he's somewhere in the Emporium, and we think he's ill. He bought unicorn blood. That's why I was mugged. The mugger heard me asking the shopkeeper about the blood and fancied some for himself, I guess. Sharp sat on the edge of a table piled high with golden coins. This is most worrying, he said. Why are you so sure Lucien is still inside the shop? Is there anything you're not telling me? Daniel was torn. His hand moved to the pocket of his jacket, to the Book of Wonders. Don't do it, said Ellie. But it was too late. Sharp's eyes were already on Daniel's hand. What have you got there? Daniel could do nothing but bring out the book. Mr. Silver doesn't leave the shop without this, he said. Not ever. I found it. When he saw the cracked black cover, Sharp made a tiny movement with his hands, as if he were about to reach out. His eyes did not leave the book as he said, This is worse than I thought. If I know Lucien, and I know all about that book, if he has left it behind, then he must be in real trouble. Daniel watched Sharp, who was watching the book. He slipped the book back into his pocket. Sharp flashed a smile. You have written in the book. I can tell by the way you hold it. Daniel looked at Ellie, who was staring back at him, her mouth open. Is it true? She said. Has Papa let you write in it? Daniel hung his head. He knew he had technically done nothing wrong by writing in the book, but somehow he felt guilty for not being able to do what Ellie couldn't. As if he was stealing a piece of her Papa away from her. Yeah, he said, both to Ellie and Sharp. Ellie nodded, but there was a faraway look in her eyes, and Daniel wished he had been honest with her from the start. Sharp stood up, scattering a pile of golden coins across the table. Then you understand what is at stake if Lucien is not found. It will be the end of all of this. He motioned around the room, and then pointed to the curtain with his cane. The end of all that lies beyond. Daniel had not wanted to think about this, although part of him knew the answer. The Emporium and the people within its walls couldn't survive without Mr. Silver. Will you help? He heard himself asking, though his voice seemed to come from somewhere far off. Panic was clouding his thoughts. He didn't wish to be ripped from a life of magic and friendship, from a place that felt like home. Sharp nodded. Certainly I will. I hate to see an old friend in trouble. Lucien would do the same for me. He clapped his hands together and strode up to the red curtain. I shall begin immediately. Rest up, Daniel Holmes, and join me whenever you wish. And with that, he was gone. I hope you know what you're doing, said Ellie. Once you invite someone in, it can be very hard to get rid of them. I told you, Papa has never let anyone see behind the scenes before, except you. There's a reason for that. He saved my life, said Daniel, and he's worried about Mr. Silver. He's weird, said Ellie. I don't want anything to do with him. She pointed a finger in Daniel's face. Sharp's your responsibility. I'm going to help Caleb with the search for Papa. I'll come too, said Daniel. Oh, I don't think so, said Ellie. You'll be far too busy keeping an eye on your new pal, won't you? A very close eye. There was already a nagging doubt in Daniel's mind. Had he done the right thing, inviting a stranger into the shop? Surely someone who risked their own life to save his couldn't be bad. Ellie, he said, about me writing in the book. I was going to tell you, I swear I was. But Ellie was already gone.